Hello everybody, today I'm back after a rather long break compared to usual, in order to discuss yet another Polytopia tribe and its strengths and weaknesses. We're coming to the end of the series with only a few more tribes yet to be discussed, the previous videos being available in a YouTube playlist, and so by this point, most of you will already know what I have to say about Zebasi. However, with the new diplomacy update, a few things have changed for Zebasi, and by that I mean that depending on how things go from here on out, Zebasi could well end up being dominant in the new meta. For those who are unaware then, the latest update is still in a kind of open beta form for this game, where players on Steam just need to enter a command to try out the beta for free. In this update, a chunk of new content was added in the Shields branch of the tech tree, but more pertinently for us here, windmills were changed, giving the player, rather than just 1 star per turn per adjacent farm, a total of 2 stars per turn per adjacent farm. This doesn't sound like a great deal, but when you consider that now brings a max level windmill up from giving the player 8 stars per turn to now 16, I think you begin to see where the problem lies. To be honest, I respect the developers of this game a good deal, and I think they are on the whole in touch with the community's feedback for the game and act on it in a sensible and fairly prompt way for such a small studio. That being said though, I really can't fathom the logic behind this balance change at all. The changelog on Steam simply states that, and I quote, "The new windmills are going to be the source of some very large cities." And yes, they will be, but that's not quite compensating for the nerf to forges, is it? Because while the tribes that used to benefit from forges were mountain tribes like Imo, the new buff to windmills is directed, knowingly or unknowingly, at Zebasi and to a lesser extent also Imperius. Of course, we need to take a step back from all of this complaining and acknowledge that these changes are still in beta precisely because the developers want players to test the new features out for themselves and see what they think. So, things as regards Zebasi are subject to change and vary in the future, and I want you to keep that in mind as this video goes on. I for one certainly predict changes to come to the tribe in the future from the developers, who, I must reiterate, tend to do a good job as regards this sort of thing, so props to them. In the end, I can only really give advice based on the information I have at this current time. That being said, Zebasi and the diplomacy beta sit firmly at the top of the tribe tier list. This comes down, as it is so often the case, to their starting technology, which is farming. This tech allows Zebasi to level up their cities in the early game and middle game with unparalleled reliability. Since when you play Zebasi, you are not really dependent on the spawn rate of the game's resources other than farms, farming alone normally being more than enough to start up a decent economy by itself, giving 2 population per square and having a forced spawn in your capital. That being said though, you are always free to take another economic tech once you have a few cities in order to grow further. Because of the way this tribe's opening is designed to be solid, economic and flexible, there are really few ways you can go wrong with Zebasi's opening, barring failing to build a second warrior early on, which will hinder your expansion capabilities significantly. This simplicity and solidity brings me on to another point actually, which is how amazing this tribe is for beginners. If you have the Steam edition of the game with all tribes or all human tribes already purchased, I highly recommend that you start learning the game with either these guys or Imperius, the latter for similar reasons. However, the middle game is a little bit more complicated, so be prepared to engage your brain a little bit more if you want to get the most out of Zebasi later on. Your main choices are twofold in the middle game, and they are between going for construction straight away and then building windmills to further upgrade cities, and a second strategy that involves building wide with riders and roads, perhaps with a jump to chivalry if you need to fight off enemies. The riders and roads strategy, on testing, can't stand up to the strategy of windmills in terms of raw T10 score. However, if you feel comfortable with your position, a more expansionist policy with knights and riders within immediate access of the start of the game is very often the best option for you to be able to put pressure on other empires quickly. Of course, windmills are also important for allowing you to place a quick giant in a pinch. In the end, don't feel like you have to commit to either tactic fully. You can go for a combination strategy that includes elements of both. Regardless of how you approach this, your second choice is also important, which is the first tech you research. For watery maps, this is nearly always fishing, because without it you risk falling behind the likes of Kiku. But on dry maps, organisation is of course good, and riding can optionally be rushed for a more aggressive approach. Hunting is the only tech I don't really recommend very often, since it's not nearly as flexible in most Kiku spawns, and realistically you want to get Chivalry and then burn all those forests into farms anyhow, because that will allow more synergy with the stupidly overpowered windmills. As regards your middle game tech, the most important one to get your hands on will be either Chivalry or Navigation in order to start pumping out stronger units, but Giants are often perfectly sufficient without much support if you opt for windmills over roads as your main tech option. Even then though, I tend to find Giants alone a bit lackluster, not because Giants are bad, so much as because riders can go a long way in conjunction with Giants for exploring, cycling attacks through choke points, and of course picking off retreating units that Giants are too slow to catch, and myriad other reasons as well. Given that riding is a tier 1 tech, this shouldn't be beyond your budget as a T0 tribe, and it's always a good investment for the sake of getting free spiritual roads. I can't really recommend any of the endgame units in the climbing branch anymore, sadly, simply for the reason that mints just aren't that great anymore, especially not for a tribe with reduced mountain spawn rate. The simplicity of playstyle also brings me on to the reason why I was reluctant to make this video in the first place. In the end, Zebasi are actually a really simple tribe to play, hence why I recommend them to beginners so strongly. In the end, there's only really so much I can say about a tribe that effectively boils down to building farms and then giants. They're fun, but more so to play than to analyse for sure. So to sum up then, Zebasi are a really good upper tier tribe who will probably get a nerf at some point in the future. But until then, they are my recommendation if you don't feel confident with a more technical tribe right now. So go out there and have fun with it. Hopefully this will have helped you, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then.